Hi there. Welcome to Bible/Chat. Gus, hi.
John.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Sometimes we get questions that are minefields
Yes.
and very tricky to answer and analyze. And so, especially lately, you've seen in the news some of the stuff that's happened with the SBC and Saddleback Church and egalitarianism and installing women as pastors. And there's been a lot of sort of like chaos in the evangelical church.
Yeah.
So maybe just start for me, not to throw you under the bus. Someone's got to be the first into the minefield, Gus. So maybe just start with for me.
Don't they sell a robot first? Or send a canary. Come on.
Canary. There are no canaries. There's you or there's me. You're gonna die. Okay.
I'm the canary.
So let's actually I like genuinely like where would we draw the line on women and their role in the church? Like, what text would you use to say what women can do or can't do in the church?
Well, I mean, First Timothy, I think we can go there, right? And
okay. So just textually.
Yeah. So the question is, so we know from First Timothy that a woman should not be teaching, right?
Okay.
So, did you guys went through First Timothy?
We did, years ago.
A couple years ago, right?
So, not that a woman can't teach. A woman can teach
in the General Assembly of the church.
Okay.
Yeah. So over men. So women can teach women, no problem.
Yeah.
Women can teach kids. And I think there's a wisdom there as to how old the kids can be, right?
Yeah.
But also there is, so women are to teach women and women are to teach kids.
Yeah.
And they are to encourage one another. They're to be part of the General Assembly, obviously.
Yeah.
But not teach. That's one of the only prohibitions.
So First Timothy 2:12.
Yeah.
Paul says, "I do not allow a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man, but to remain quiet."
Yeah.
So
and then it's interesting that he goes to the reason, right?
Yeah.
He goes to the creative order.
Yeah.
He doesn't go to like, well, I just think women have nothing good to say.
Yeah.
He says, verse 13, "For it was Adam who was first created." Then Eve. So he goes to the created order.
Yeah.
He doesn't even go to something that says, "Hey, women, because of the fall, women are inferior than men, or women are not as good because they actually were the ones that caused men to fall."
Yeah, or even or even women don't have the gift of teaching. He
Exactly.
doesn't address that. So so we did that issue back in like episode 100 and something.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, a long time ago. But
I wasn't here, so give me the rundown.
But let's say that is the rundown. So what you're saying is right. Like, just to summarize, like, a woman is not supposed to teach.
Yeah.
Or exercise authority. So
in the General Assembly of the church, that's why I use that, is because there are opportunities for women to exercise the gift of teaching, like you said, within a Bible study with women, on a General Assembly for women, women's ministry.
So both of
kids.
our wives teach Sunday school.
Yeah.
They teach women. They teach women in groups of adult women, like women's ministry conversations. So there's ways that a woman can teach in those ways, which is good. Okay, so that's sort of the prohibition, kind of where we want to draw the line. So, in response to what's happened with Saddleback, we got, not specifically connected to that, but we did have an interesting discussion, and we got a question from a girl at our church. It was actually a super insightful question. I want to actually read it because I think the question is very insightful, and we need to sort of like understand what's going on here. She says, "How can we as a church set up a culture where men know their role as leaders without dismissing women's teaching or wisdom on theological and spiritual issues?" Yeah. We know that men lead in the homes and in the role as pastors. However, for many churches, this has turned into men believing that this implies that women have no spiritual wisdom or truth that they can offer to men in any setting. Yeah. Okay, so let's address like what's happening there, right? So what would you say is going on in a situation where you get this like hard complementarianism?
Yeah, and you could call that hard complementarianism or misogyny. Yeah. Just for if you
like
want to
honestly,
call it. Yeah, like a true misogyny, right? Yeah. Where you think where women have nothing good to say. Right. They're supposed to look pretty and make a good meal for the husband to come and dine. Right. And we know that that's not what the Bible teaches at all. Yeah. So that would be not according to Scripture, because even Paul had women that were serving alongside him.
Totally. And I mean, there's tons of examples in the New Testament of women teaching even in situations where under the care of their husband, they're teaching even like Aquila and Priscilla, the famous one, where Priscilla, they're sitting together and having discussions with Apollos.
Or even the issue in Philippi, right? They're meeting by the river, some of the women to pray. In chapter 16, right?
Yeah.
Or 15 and 16.
15, 16, yeah.
And the leader seems to be Lydia.
Lydia, yeah.
Who God opens her heart, and then they're meeting at her home.
Yeah.
Most likely because she has a big enough home to meet,
totally,
right?
Yeah.
So from early on, the women that followed Jesus wasn't telling them, you see, it's kind of uncomfortable, but you shouldn't be following because you don't know anything.
Yeah, Mary, please don't sit here and listen to the teaching.
Exactly.
You don't need to know.
Yeah,
right?
Go serve.
Martha's out there making food. Join her.
Exactly.
Yeah. He actually says the opposite of that.
Yeah, exactly.
He says learn, worship. Yeah, good.
He says the opposite of that.
So what we would say is, obviously women have wisdom, they have theological understanding, oftentimes more wisdom than men at certain moments, right? So it's important for men to understand that and with humility to say, hey, teach me, because there are areas where maybe I can grow. But that within the confines of the General Assembly, of the teaching of men in the church, when the church is gathered, whether it's in church or in Bible study, that in those settings, that's just not what God has designed.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean there's not wisdom that women can share. Doesn't mean there's not places that they can use those gifts.
Absolutely. And I think that you and I have both benefited by talking to our wives and hearing what they have to say, right?
Yeah, and other ladies too, right?
And of course, and other ladies too. And I think that sometimes they could even help us to attack a text in a different way that we never thought of.
Give us insights.
Give us insight.
I can't tell you how many times, I stand in the back door when church is over. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with Jackie or Bonnie, some of these ladies in our church, and I'm like, oh, that's so wise. Yeah, I should have said that. That they're so wise and so sharp. Okay, so let's move one layer kind of around the corner. What about situations where a woman is teaching, let's say in a theological setting, but not in the church, in a school, in a university, for example. She's teaching Greek 1 at a university. What would we say to that?
I would have no problem with that.
Why?
Right? Because it's not the General Assembly. Yeah. And
it's not the church.
Yeah, I wouldn't even have a problem reading. I think I shared with you, and you weren't very happy, but one of my favorite commentators, it's a lady who does an amazing job with the Greek text. Yeah. And it's very honest with the text.
Totally.
So obviously, that's not... Now, having her be my pastor would be a problem, right?
Totally.
But if they're teaching Greek 1 or Greek 2, or I remember talking to a seminary in Eastern Europe, and they were doing grammar classes, and they had a lady come and do grammar before they do Greek grammar.
Yeah.
Do refreshers, because she was a grammar teacher.
Totally.
And she was fantastic, and it was exactly what they needed. Yeah. And she was part of the seminary doing that kind of stuff,
which is awesome. Yeah. Okay, so let's answer their specific question now. I mean, in terms of which is a great question. How does a church establish a culture like that? Yeah.
Well, I mean, what our friend is asking is, how can we establish a culture of humility, right? Because it's not a culture of women are better than men or vice versa, right? Yeah. It's a culture of learning and practicing the one another's.
Yeah, totally.
So if you are walking in the Spirit and this lady is walking in the Spirit, you would have conversations and you would never think, well, I won't listen to you because you're a lady. Right. Obviously, you don't understand what you're talking about. And we would never be, because our own Savior wasn't misogynistic, so we would never fall into that trap or thinking, she has no wisdom to impart to me.
So long as we're walking in the Spirit.
Exactly. Yeah. And she's walking in the Spirit as well.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that it isn't just with male and female roles. That can happen even with things like professional distinctions. Oh, you're not a pastor. You don't have any wisdom to offer me, right?
Well, we like that guy because he's a lawyer. He's very logical.
Yeah. And
that. What does that mean?
That means nothing.
So the guy that's a mechanic doesn't have any wisdom because he's not walking in the Spirit.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the opposite of the way that we should think. Exactly. Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Exactly. It really is an issue of each individual heart saying, "Look, I need to be teachable, and God uses His people to teach me. It doesn't matter what gender they are, it doesn't matter what they do for a living, doesn't matter what race they are, doesn't matter what background they have. God's Spirit dwells in His people, and I need to hear from God through His people and be willing to fellowship and understand and learn and grow from them."
I remember when we were living in Spain, there was a guy that came to our church, and he was like a blue collar worker. He was a guy in his 50s, but I crafted my Sunday night sermons that were a little more than just sermons. It was like more like a class with him in mind. Yeah. Because he had such good feedback to me always. And he was a guy who never went to. I think he barely graduated from high school. Yeah. But he had such insight because he read scriptures and walked in the Spirit. And I remember thinking of him as I would like say certain things, because I knew that he would have questions about it, or he would, challenge me on some of these things. And I think I grew not only as a preacher but as a believer. Yeah. Talking with a guy like that who always had some, feedback or
because he was spiritual.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that I think is the key bright line distinction, right? Are we walking in the Spirit or are we not?
Yeah.
And that really is the issue. Not all these other things that are fleshly and physical. Yeah. Good. That's fantastic. Well, thank you. I hope that's helpful for you. If you have any other questions about this issue, please feel free to submit them to us at info@faithbibleoc.org. Thanks so much.